Anyone who's visited Japan will find out pretty instantly just how amazing this country seems like on the surface. Everybody is kind, respectful, the streets are clean, the food tastes good, the culture is diverse and grand. But when you look deeper underneath that surface, it might not seem all that utopian. And if you've been on my channel before, then this is definitely something that you'd be aware of, as it's a big thing that I cover here on this channel. But I found this recent article that has actually quantified just how much of a farce this surface happiness of the Japanese people really might be. We got this article here that, just reading the title here, says that according to a study, the happiness index of Japanese people in Japan is actually in the bottom 3 in the world, with children ranking in the worst 2 of the world, saying that Japanese people are not as happy as a lot of other countries out there. Which is surprising, right? Like, again, when you look at it from the surface, Japan does seem like a country where they've got their shit together and the people are satisfied and the people are happy. So how did they get these numbers? Why are Japanese people not as happy as other people in other countries? This article even starts off saying that, well, if you, again, look at it from the surface, there's a lot of great things happening in Japan. For example, in the world, they are the 4th biggest economy in the world, which actually surprised me a lot. I thought Japanese economy was kind of going to the shitter, but apparently they are the 4th biggest in the world. And on top of that, people in Japan have a high, health rate. Like, we have one of the highest life expectancies in the world. It is a relatively safe country as well, with the crime rate being very, very low. Again, as I mentioned, the town is clean. You barely see any rubbish, let alone any bins outside. And it's a country where, the seasons are in order. The summer is hot, the winter is cold, and the atmosphere and the nature changes with the seasons and creates some very beautiful sceneries. On top of that, the culture, the subcultures that Japan is uniquely has, things like anime, manga, and games is also very, very prevalent. And there's a lot of benefits to moving to Japan. Like, I love living in this country. A lot of my friends who moved here love living in this country. This country is great. But on top of that, we have a lot of unavoidable problems in Japan as well, especially after the bubble burst, the big economic bubble burst in the 80s. We've had a very large stint of the economy not growing at all, even though we are still apparently the 4th biggest economic power in the world. We have problems of an aging population, a declining birth crisis, the increased natural disasters that are happening. We're just within this year, I can't even count the amount of earthquakes that I have experienced. And, there is a very, very big and real problem of gender equality happening in Japan. And it's the government and the people still trying to figure out how exactly to solve it. So when you take all of that into consideration, when you take all the pros and all the cons into consideration, what do we end up with? Well, we end up with this graph right here. This is a graph done by a study which shows the amount of people that answered in the survey as to how happy are you in life right now. How they took this survey was they asked 2,000 people between the ages of 16 to 74, making sure that each and every person, or at least as many people as possible, were living in different regions, different lifestyles, different jobs, different family situations, to try and get a broad perspective on the Japanese people. And out of 30 countries, that they asked, Japan ranks one of the lowest in terms of the rate of people who answered that they are happy. They're happy with their lives, or they feel somewhat happy with their lives. As you can see at the top here, 2024, out of the 30 countries that were asked, the average amount of people who answered, yes, I am happy, is 71%, which is good. 70% of people, 7 out of 10 people saying that they are somewhat happy or very happy with their lives is always great to hear. The number ones, actually the top parts here are the Netherlands, which answered 85%. I can see why, the Netherlands is a great freaking country. Mexico ranked pretty highly as well. Indonesia, India, Brazil, Thailand, these are all in the top right here. But all the way here at the bottom, above Hungary and South Korea, ranks Japan at 57%. And this has been a pretty steady decline ever since 2011. As you can see, in 2011, 70% of people in Japan felt happy. Obviously, it dipped at the start of the pandemic, all the way down to 52, gradually increasing a little bit as the pandemic reached its end. But now we're seeing another dip again. And it's not just a general happiness index that has dipped in Japan as well. The OECD did, according to the Better Life Index, which is basically a way to show people, like, you know, in terms of the work-life balance. Like, are you happy with the work-life balance? Out of 35 countries that the OECD asked for the Better Life Index, Japan ranked as 27th. And in terms of the well-being, global work-life balance index, out of the 18 countries that were asked, Japan ranked dead last. So as you can see, it's not just general happiness, it's also about the work-life balance, which might not be surprising to hear, because if there's one, I guess, big demerit thing in Japanese culture that a lot of people probably know about, is that Japan's work environment, working culture is pretty goddamn brutal, especially compared to other Western cultures out there. I can say that, wholeheartedly, as someone who firsthand experienced that when I interned at a Japanese company. Shit wasn't fun. It's what made me to drive myself to do what I do today. And luckily, I don't have to deal with Japanese companies as much anymore. I'm my own boss in that sense. So I got lucky with that, and I'm very, happy that I managed to get into that point. But it turns out it's not just the adults that are unhappy in Japan. It's also the children. There was the same study that was done here in this graph asking children around the age of 15, which I think is a good age because, you're kind of right in the middle of puberty. You're just old enough to not be considered like a small child, but, you're kind of in your teenage years, which is always a, very emotional time for anybody. And according to the same study, Japan ranked second to last, above Turkey at 53%. The top ones, again, are the Netherlands at 90%. Man, kids in the Netherlands are fucking happy. Mexico, Romania, Finland, Croatia, a lot of Eastern European countries are considered, the children there are considered very happy. They're very content and very happy with their lives. Japan, however, is below the UK at 62%. That's saying a lot considering British people love to complain all the goddamn time. Japan is below that. Another index that was done by the same, or rather a different, research, was they asked a bunch of 15-year-old kids from all over the world, how easy is it to make friends? And this is the results right here. Romania, being the highest at 83% of children, said, yeah, I find it pretty easy to make friends. Same with Norway, Croatia, the Netherlands again. Europe just seems to have their shit together. However, all the way at the bottom here, above Chile, is Japan, once again. So, with every single one of these statistics, Japan seems to be ranking pretty goddamn low on every single one. The adults are unhappy, the children are unhappy. Everyone in general in Japan seems to be pretty miserable. And it's not just a matter of outside circumstances as well, like work or friends. It also is internal as well. There was another study here that asked people between the ages of 13 to 29, how confident are you in yourself? How much self-esteem do you have? And these are the results right here. The left one being, I am confident in myself, and the right here being, I'm not confident in myself, and the spectrum being here. But look at this. We look at things like America, for instance, and 57.9% say that I have confidence in myself. Pretty high. Same with the UK, with 42%, with France, 42.3%. And then we have Japan, 10.4%. And when we look at the opposite side, it becomes very worrying with 24.2%. 1 in 4 people say that they have absolutely zero confidence in themselves. Compare that to something like America, where only 4.2% answered that. Even Germany, 3.8%. France, 2.2%. The highest here, after Japan, being South Korea with 8.3%. It does seem like it's not just a matter of an outside circumstantial happiness, but also an internal circumstantial happiness. It's causing people, or maybe that a level of self-esteem is also reflective on the outside world. Either way, there seems to be this intrinsic problem in Japan of Japanese people being miserable, both from an outside perspective and an internal perspective too. And the article here mentions that this is very fascinating. Again, especially when you consider things like, Japan having a pretty decent to strong economy, especially compared to a lot of other countries out there, being a relatively healthy and safe country to live in. Yet, with all of these merits, Japan and Japanese people are pretty miserable right now. They don't feel like they're the happiest that they could be. So why is that? And this is a question I ask myself as well, because it really is a contrasting perspective, especially when you look at it from the surface. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, Japan just seems like a very utopian country. It seems like there are no problems whatsoever. And yet the numbers here are telling a very, very different story. And there is very few conclusions or reasons as to why these numbers ended up being what they were. But according to one particular professor at Kyoto University, she reckons that the reason might be is because a lot of Japanese people are very heavily affected by comparing themselves to other people. It says here that, based on the fact that Japan is very much a collectivist society, it's something that, we don't want to be sticking out in any single way. We want to be like everybody else. If other people are doing it like this, then I need to be doing it like that as well. Otherwise, I might be socially ostracized. I might be looked weirdly. I might get the bad end of the stick because I'm not fitting in with the crowd. That collectivist mentality might be a reason why Japanese people are not able to pursue happiness in their own way. Because I think it goes without saying that different people seek and pursue happiness in different ways. What might be something that is really shitty to one person might be an absolute godsend to another person. And, different personalities and stuff like that seek different things in their lives. That's just how humans are. Regardless of if you're the same race, same gender, same age, it doesn't really matter. People are different. People want to pursue life and happiness in so many different ways. And it's the fact that, again, Japanese people, say for example, they go onto social media and see that someone who is not them is being more successful than they are. They are gaining more attention. They're seeking more happiness. And that comparing of yourself to another person, yet not being able to fulfill that because of circumstantial differences or the fact that society itself is not able to provide that happiness to that particular individual is what's driving people to not feel as happy as they are. And I think that's a pretty interesting hypothesis, because concerning things like social media and comparing yourself to people on social media that are more successful than you is not a Japan unique problem. In fact, I feel any country that has a strong social media presence, aka basically the rest of the Western world, also runs into that same problem. I mean, I don't know what race you are who's watching this video. I don't know what gender you are. I don't know how old you are, but you're probably on social media, and you've probably seen people on social media who are more successful than you are, regardless of how you define success yourself. And everybody, I'm sure, admittedly, everybody, I'm sure, has seen a more successful person on social media and thought to themselves, man, why can't I have that? And they stop to compare themselves to it. And they see that and they feel shitty about themselves. I mean, look, admittedly, I'm going to be real with you guys. I felt that many times in my life. I think that's just the way that social media is. That's just human nature. We're an attention-seeking species, right? Like, we need that validation from the outside. So this hypothesis of social media affecting Japanese people's happiness, I don't necessarily think is a big reason as to why Japan's happiness index is as low as it is. Because if that was the case, if that was a big part of the reason, then we wouldn't be seeing such a massive disparity between self-esteem, or how easy it is to make friends with people, or just the general happiness index of children and adults. Like, these would be not that different. So from here on out, this is just my hypothesis. Obviously, I'm not a fucking professor. I'm not an anthropologist. I'm not anything like that. I have no credentials whatsoever. This is purely just my opinion on how I see it. I think the biggest reason why Japanese people are not as happy as other people are is because there are so many social issues that are happening in Japan right now that are underlying and not talked about. And as a result of globalization, as a result of Japan opening up to the rest of the world and learning about other societies, learning about other cultures in the West, that comparison, I think, is finally sinking into Japanese people that maybe they don't have it as good as the rest of the world does. I would say that within the past, 20 something years, basically since the 21st century, Japan and a lot of younger people in Japan are becoming a lot more open to the Western world. They're seeing so much more of the Western world and Western culture, whether that be through direct contact with, someone who lives overseas, or maybe they're put in a position where they're able to visit overseas and, see other cultures. And again, just the sheer access to the internet basically just opens the door wide to anybody who has an internet connection to see what the field looks like. And I think to a lot of Japanese people, the grass does look greener on the other side. They see that, they don't have to be in a particular work environment that is similar to theirs. They don't have to be a collectivist society. They don't have to conform with how everybody else is. I'm sure a Japanese person will look at a culture like America or Australia or anywhere in Europe a lot more of a, non-collectivist society and think like, they're able to do what they want and seek happiness on their own. Why can't we do that in this country? Why do we have to conform with how society views us? Why do we have to conform with how other people view us? Why do we have to be judged by other people? And I think it's that realization of cultural difference that is finally sinking into Japanese people and realizing that maybe the way that we're doing it now is not the best way to do it. I mean, obviously, that is a complete personal preference at that point. That is a personal prerogative. If you want to, and you have no problem with conforming to other people's standards and society standards, then that's completely fine, of course. But if you want to be more individualistic, and I think a lot of Japanese people are slowly starting to adopt more of an individualistic trait in their lives and the way that they pursue happiness and the way that they want to live life. But society, of course, in Japan, being, traditionally a very collectivist society, rather, I think is like stopping them, is creating this massive wall for a lot of people to not be able to seek that individualistic life. Again, this is just my hypothesis. This is just from how I view it as someone who did, grow up with a lot of Japanese customs, but also grew up with a lot of Western customs as well. I've seen both sides of the coin. And I think in this case, a lot of Japanese people finally realize that there is another side to that coin and they're seeing it for the first time. But again, this is a really interesting topic, I think. And of course, I don't have nearly enough credentials to be able to fully say that this is the reason why Japanese people are miserable in today's society. So again, I'm going to throw the question over to you guys. What do you guys think about it? Please let me know in the comments below. I'd be super interested to know. And, at the end of the day, man, seek happiness in your own way. That's all I can say. If you're going to take anything away from this, is that just because the Japanese people are unhappy, or maybe some of the unhappiest people, most miserable people in today's world, don't let that from stopping you from visiting Japan and appreciating Japanese culture and sharing Japanese culture, because I think, as a lot of Japanese people do have a lot of respect for their own culture, seeing other cultures adopting that respectfully and sharing that respectfully and sharing their love for it respectively, I think makes a lot of Japanese people happy. And, as someone who is half Japanese themselves, I always love it when people are very respectable and love sharing and talking about Japanese culture. So keep doing that. Keep spreading the love. That's all that matters at the end of the day. But anyways, guys, again, let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. And thanks for watching. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to smack my face right here. Subscribe to the channel. Let's keep making big channel number go bigger over here next to my head. A couple more videos you can check out if you enjoyed this one. Links to my social media, as well as my Patreon to support me directly. And Nonsense, my clothing brand. Check it out at nonsense.jp. Links in the description. And I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.